Fellow Africans, guess what is actually happening now? Botswana and Zimbabwe, their leaders, they just what shocked the world leaders, okay? Their answers just, challenged world powerful leaders, ladies and gentlemen. Live, just watch this and listen attentively to what they said.
Generally, is a very young continent with a median age of 19.3. Botswana's median age is 25. And so with such a population, Africa is poised to rule the world.
So, what are your plans for the world once you rule it?
To make it fairer, to make it more equitable, to ensure that intellectual property is internalized in every part of the African continent, that innovation serves humanity, not just a predatory elite, and that everybody can partake equitably and benefit from the fruits of the economy and the vast opportunities that are available in the world.
President Nagawa, I wonder what lessons you've been in the government of Zimbabwe for decades in various roles, including through a very turbulent period where your predecessor famously kicked out the whites and then the economy tanked and now it's rising again. I wonder if you would summarize the lessons that your country has learned from that experience.
I'm not so sure what you have in mind. But let me say, our economy has faced challenges. I'm sure you're aware.
Yes.
Zimbabwe has been under sanctions for decades as a result of us claiming our land from the British and making ourselves independent. We seized the land and gave it to our people. So sanctions were imposed on us. But in spite of all that constraint we have developed, and we are happy that we have developed on our own, and we feel very independent.
Well, some of the land was seized from people who were born there. So I wonder if there's a lesson about targeting people on the basis of their skin color. Do you think?
I hear you.
Well, people had their land seized in Zimbabwe who were born in Zimbabwe, and they were targeted on the basis of their race, and I wonder if you think that's good or bad.
No. Land did not belong to a race. It belonged to Zimbabweans. Right. So when the colonialists took land from us, time came when we asserted ourselves, take back our land. And those who wanted to have land at the same basis as the African people of Zimbabwe remained. But those who felt they were superior left.
Africa is waking up, ladies and gentlemen. Its young people are full of energy and ideas. They are ready to change the world. Leaders like Botswana's President Domaboko say this is not actually a dream. It is a reality, ladies and gentlemen. Africa has the power to rise. It has the knowledge, talent, and of course, courage to influence global decisions. At the World Government Summit, ladies and gentlemen, the president for Botswana, Domaboko, specifically spoke boldly. He said Africa is poised to rule the world. He didn't actually mean domination, ladies and gentlemen, or conflict. He meant opportunity. Africa has a young population that can actually create, invent, and of course lead. Boko stressed or noted that this talent must be nurtured, ladies and gentlemen, and protected. Ideas must stay in Africa to benefit its people. The president explained that Africa's history has shaped its future. Centuries of struggle, colonization, and of course exploitation taught the continent resilience, ladies and gentlemen. Boko said Africa learned to face challenges or difficulties with courage and vision. This history, ladies and gentlemen, is not just a story. It is a guide. It shows the importance of unity, fair opportunity, and of course self-resilience. Boko reminded leaders that Africa's strength is not only in resources, ladies and gentlemen. It is in its people. Education, innovation, and of course leadership are keys to success. By supporting young people, ladies and gentlemen, Africa can actually transform industries, technology, and of course governance. This is a moment of awakening. Africa's leaders, ladies and gentlemen, are now thinking beyond borders. They want fair trade, innovation, and of course sustainable growth. Boko's message, ladies and gentlemen, carries a moral lesson. Power comes from unity, knowledge, and of course justice. By building strong systems, Africa can actually rise without harming others. The stage was set, ladies and gentlemen. Africa is ready to claim its place. Dumaboko's vision inspires hope, ladies and gentlemen. It tells the world that progress is possible when courage, meet opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, whilst Botswana president actually spoke about future Botswana power, Zimbabwe reflected on past struggle, okay? President Emmerson Mnangagwa addressed decades of sanctions. These sanctions followed Zimbabwe's independence, ladies and gentlemen, and sovereignty and land reforms. Land taken by colonial Botswana rulers was actually returned to the people, ladies and gentlemen. President Mnangagwa, okay, said, and I quote, "We have seized the land and gave it to our people, so sanctions were imposed on us. But in spite of all that constraint we have developed, and we are happy that we feel very independent," quotation close. These words, ladies and gentlemen, show pride in sovereignty or independence. They also highlight perseverance. Zimbabwe faced international pressure, but kept moving forward, ladies and gentlemen. The president explained the land issue clearly. Colonial rulers had, taken fertile lands, okay, from indigenous or native, Zimbabweans. After independence, ladies and gentlemen, Zimbabwe returned the land to its rightful owners. Those who respected the changed state, ladies and gentlemen, those who felt superior left. This shows that fairness and of course justice can actually guide the nations or state through conflict. President Mnangagwa's story, ladies and gentlemen, carries a lesson. Progress is not only economic, it is moral and historical. Nations or states can actually grow whilst correcting past wrongs. Zimbabwe continues to develop in agriculture, mining, and of course governance despite sanctions. Its people learned self-reliance, courage, and of course pride. Botswana and Zimbabwe's statement, ladies and gentlemen, complement each other. Botswana looks forward with vision. Zimbabwe looks back to understand lessons. Together, they show that Africa can actually combine history, okay, and opportunity. By learning from struggles and of course, supporting youth, ladies and gentlemen, the continent can actually rise globally. These leaders speak not to boast, but to teach. Africa's potential is linked or connected to its history, justice, education, and of course, unity are pillars of progress. Africa's rise is not guaranteed, ladies and gentlemen. Boko emphasized responsibility. Young people, governance, and of course, businesses must work together. Okay, innovation must also serve communities, not only wealth. Knowledge should actually stay in Africa, ladies and gentlemen. This actually encourages long-term growth, okay? Education is central, ladies and gentlemen. Africa has millions of talented young people like you and I. With proper support, ladies and gentlemen, they can actually invent, build, and lead. And of course, Boko called for governance to actually create programs that can actually teach skills and of course support entrepreneurship. He stressed or noticed fairness. Everyone must actually have access to opportunity. The moral lesson, ladies and gentlemen, is clear here. Leadership is not power over peoples, okay, or others. It is service to people. Africa's leaders must actually guide their nations or states with wisdom. They must protect resources, support youth, and of course honor history. Zimbabwe's experience, ladies and gentlemen, reinforces this point. President Mnangagwa showed or demonstrated that standing firm during pressure is critical. Respecting history and of course justice builds confidence at home and of course abroad. Sanctions and of course criticism cannot actually stop nations or states with strong moral foundations. Africa must also cooperate. Nations or states can actually share ideas, technology, and of course solutions. By working together, they strengthened their voice on the global stage. President Boko, ladies and gentlemen, highlighted that unity is Africa's secret weapon. Okay, history has proven that this unity weakens nations or states, in Africa. Now, it is the moment to act. Africa's youth are ready. Leaders are actually determined. Knowledge and of course ideas are growing. Ladies and gentlemen, President Boko's words actually challenge world's powers, including everyone. Support Africa's growth or risk being left behind. If you're actually following this particular story, ladies and gentlemen, please make sure that you're going to like this particular video, subscribe to the channel, and of course turn on notifications, okay? Africa stands at crossroads or, junctions, ladies and gentlemen. Its history, struggles, and of course talent coverage to create opportunity. Botswana's Boko sees the future. Zimbabwe's Emmerson Mnangagwa respects or honors, the past. Together, they actually show a path of courage, justice, and of course vision. Africa's message, ladies and gentlemen, is not actually aggression. It is readiness to innovate, lead, and of course contribute to the world fairly. Boko's statement that Africa can actually rule the world. It is about potential. It is about shaping global decisions with fairness, knowledge, and of course ethics. Mnangagwa's story or narrative reminds nations or states that independence or sovereignty and of course justice requires courage. Sanctions, criticism, or external pressure cannot actually stop progress when a nation stands for its people. Africa can actually rise without harming others, ladies and gentlemen. It can actually claim leadership through knowledge, fairness, and of course unity. The moral lesson is timeless, ladies and gentlemen. Nations, can actually grow when history is actually honored and expected. People are supported, and of course youth are empowered. Africa has learned these lessons, ladies and gentlemen, already. Leaders like Duma Boko from Botswana and the Zimbabwean president are teaching that power is earned, not taken. Africa's youth, resources, and of course ideas are ready to shine. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching this video.